There is a seemingly fantastic assumption that the ancient Egyptians, when building their pyramids, were able to move massive stone blocks using sound, that is, they mastered acoustic levitation. Modern science is trying to explain everything with the help of dubious historical reconstructions depicting tens of thousands of slaves involved in construction using ropes and pulleys. Physicists partially admitted the possibility of controlled acoustic levitation. Moreover, they mastered the technology of controlling it first in one, and then in two planes. Many have probably seen a macro shot of a drop of water hanging in the air. Such experiments were carried out, for example, by scientists from Switzerland. But no one managed to achieve three-plane control of the process for a long time. And so in January of this year, specialists from the University of Tokyo made small objects of different shapes and masses float in space using sound waves. Japanese matrices of directional sound emitters, located at certain points, allow objects to move along complex trajectories. At first, scientists operated with water drops, pieces of polystyrene with a diameter of 0.5 mm to 2 mm, as well as small radio components, but the crowning achievement of a series of experiments was the installation of a cube from a children's construction set on top of a toy pyramid. The experimenters assure that after some time they will be able to manipulate objects of any mass and volume in the same way. All that remains is to learn how to select a sound of a certain frequency and power. They also say that acoustic levitation will help to completely overcome gravity in the future. The use of this technology to create a new type of aircraft has already interested NASA engineers. And in the early 1930s, Swedish aircraft engineer Henrik Jelson watched in Tibet as Tibetan monks delivered stones for the construction of a temple. Having dragged a stone of about 1 meter 50 centimeters in diameter to a small horizontal platform with the help of an ox, it was dumped into a pit 15 centimeters deep, corresponding to the size of the stone. The platform was located at a distance of 100 meters from a steep cliff 400 meters high, on top of which the temple was being built. At 63 meters from the pit stood 19 musicians. And the engineer measured all the distances precisely, believing that this was one of the elements of the ensuing mysterious phenomenon, and behind them were 200 monks, located in radial lines, several people on each. The angle between the lines was 5 degrees, and in the center of this formation lay the stone. The musicians had 13 large drums of 3 different sizes, weighing 150 kilograms each, suspended on wooden crossbars and facing the sounding surface to the pit with the stone. Between the drums, 6 large metal pipes were placed in different places, also facing the pit with their bells. There were 2 musicians standing near each pipe, blowing into it in turns. On a special command, the entire orchestra would start playing loudly, and the choir of monks would sing along in unison. And as Henrik Jelson said, 4 minutes later, when the sound had reached its maximum, the boulder in the pit began to swing and suddenly soared in a parabola straight to the top of a 400-meter cliff. If you believe Henry's story, the monks raised 5 to 6 huge boulders to the temple under construction every hour in this way. You must agree that only an aircraft engineer could understand that when studying such a fantastic phenomenon, every little thing is important in the form of distances, angles, quantities, and so on. Everyone who is connected with aviation must know that there are no little things in their work, because very often all sorts of little things are paid for with the lives of pilots and passengers. Jelson probably took his measurements with a handheld protractor and a regular tape measure, which is why he had errors in his measurements. But nevertheless, he was very close to the true dimensions. All the Swedes' measurements must be multiples of constant p, the golden ratio, as well as 5 and 24 thousandths, the product of constant p and the golden ratio. The stone was in the center of a circle formed by an orchestra and monks who sent sound vibrations to a pit, which was a reflection of these vibrations. They raised the boulder 400 meters. The sounds clearly increased smoothly, for minutes or 240 seconds, therefore, the vibrations were harmonic, that is, quite beautiful and creative. Yes, creative, after all, a sacred temple was being built. The stone flew up in a parabola. At first it went almost vertically, then it began to deviate towards the cliff, to its top. It follows that there were fewer monks on the radial lines closer to the rock, since the vibrations, reflected from the rock, did not allow the boulder to approach it. As it approached the top, the number of reflected vibrations began to drop sharply and the stone deviated in the direction of least resistance, accurately hitting the top. Perhaps, in similar ways in ancient times, people moved now unliftable blocks of stone over significant distances and great heights. How and why a Swedish aircraft engineer ended up in Tibet in the early 1930s is unknown. But this is exactly the case when the right person was in the right place at the right time. Henry could only have, as mentioned earlier, a hand protractor, a tape measure and a wrist or pocket watch, but hardly a stopwatch. His 4 minutes on a wrist or pocket watch could have been a little more than 240 seconds. Kjelsen could measure 5 degrees with his protractor, but his protractor could not detect 1 minute and 26 seconds of angle. The same thing happened with the tape measure because of the unevenness of the surface. 63 meters could have been 62 meters, or 64 meters. The depth of the pit was probably measured with a tape measure in the center, and the error is quite acceptable. Instead of 15 centimeters, the depth could have been 16 centimeters. The Swede could not measure the frequency of vibrations, but 6 pipes, 13 drums, and a choir of 200 people must have sounded deafening, especially in the mountains. Playing and singing is still better than dragging boulders with a diameter of 1.5 meters and an approximate weight of 4 tons up an almost vertical cliff 400 meters high. The diameter of the boulders was also close to the golden ratio. The mass of the stone was calculated based on a regular granite ball with a diameter of 1 meter and 50 centimeters, so the weight could be slightly less, fluctuating within plus or minus 4,000 kilograms. All the dimensions of this case of levitation are one way or another close to the world mathematical constants p and the golden section. It is very possible that the sound frequencies were multiples of these values, but let the specialists do all the calculations, but we have indirect evidence that, true or false, but still some path to the solution of levitation has opened. Now it is up to physicists, acousticians, mathematicians and other specialists. In this Tibetan lifting system, the main role was clearly played by pipes, in the literal sense. Their roar was almost continuous, since it is no coincidence that there were 2 trumpeters for each. They changed to catch their breath. Drums and choir could create a kind of corridor well, along which the stone flew up, simultaneously supporting it at the moments of changing trumpeters. The simultaneous efforts of the pipes, drums and choir were primarily needed at the very beginning, to lift the boulder off the ground. It has long been known that the greatest effort is needed when something heavy needs to be moved first, and then, as it turns out. Let us recall that in our case, a stone weighing about 4 tons flew up to a height of 400 meters to the sounds of 6 pipes, 13 drums, and a choir of 200 people. The question arises, why is this technology either completely unknown or long forgotten in most parts of the world? Perhaps the technical progress of mankind is to blame for this, due to the development of which the need to use ancient methods of sound levitation disappeared. And what do you think about this, dear viewers? Write your versions in the comments. And see you on our channel.